Alright, good evening everyone. 9:07, Friday, October 12th. Look at that, 50 degrees outside. Finally, October 12th. Weather's looking proper. Same thing, updated 50 degrees. Alright, I'm gonna give my hand at some live games. It's one of the presets. There's a higher chance that players will be using it. 15-15 could be a pretty slow game. Or long. And slow. Well, let's see how my opponent does. 1279. It's all very basic. Italian game. Scotch game. One of those two. I don't know. It's the open game. E4, everybody. We all know how to attack f7, I hope. As white. And how to defend it as black. Now, if he brings his bishop to g4, I could play the unsound variation of the Legau's trap. I'd probably play the sound if he were to do it. His rating's not that low. The unsound version opens the trap immediately, allowing for black to take white's queen and lose the game. However, they can use their queenside knight at c6 to capture my knight where it ends up. I'll show it to you if it ever happens, but it's not going to happen in this game. I would probably play the sound version. I try to do it all the time. Now, this isn't the best for white because it does allow black to unstack its pawns, but I like it still. I don't know why it's taking him so long. Bishop to h6 if he doesn't advance his pawn to e5. And if he does, I may bring my queen to d5, targeting his b7 pawn. Or pawn at b7. Semantics. Now, bishop to h6, you ask why? Well, actually, looking at it again, no. He'd have to advance his knight, preferably to e7. Anyway, if he were to capture my bishop with his pawn at g7, it would open up a diagonal for... Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Excuse me. That's my knight, not a bishop. Anyway, I can fianchetto my bishop and still use that tactic. Well, it would be a little different. Oh, no, excuse me. It still works. Yeah, because if he takes my bishop with his pawn, my queen would take the rook. But he'd have to move that knight, because if he takes with the knight, then it doesn't do me any good. That's to prevent him playing b5 Well, actually, he could do it here, I suppose. It wouldn't bother me anyway. Um, Earlier in the game, if it's my bishop at c4, for example, moves like this, the pawn exchange will open up the A file, and I will be on the next move and able to capture his rook with mine. And early in the game, it's not uncommon for at least one of the two pieces on the queen side, knight or bishop, to not be developed, allowing the queen an open rank to defend her queen side rook. I have a pretty substantial time advantage. I play a lot of 15-10 at the club. When you get close to 4 minutes or 5, against a player like me, that could be problematic. For the one on the short stick. Short end of the stick. Is that the phrase? I don't know. Ziltoid 7. Now, retreating to h4 and then probably being pushed by his pawn at g5 and then retreating to g3 is a good idea to relocate the bishop and attack through the center. However, without a pawn on the d file, it's not nearly as effective. So I'm going to capture the knight. Now, I would capture with the pawn, but if he does the queen, I'll castle kingside. Even if he does the pawn, I'll probably castle kingside. Because then I can use my next tempo move when he develops his bishop, probably in order to castle with my rook to d1. My queenside rook. Then my rooks would be in a good central-ish position. My kingside rook would want to probably come to the e-file. Okay, so he takes with the pawn. That's what I would have done. Queen can still go along the black diagonal, preferably maybe to like b6, though c7 is effective. The only danger here is the g file is open, so he could play his rook to g8 and then try to exploit the pin pawn on at g2. Though he doesn't have a light squared bishop, thankfully. Alright, I'm gonna actually stop that pawn. I don't often do this, but in this situation, I think it's a good idea. G3 is probably going to happen at some point. Or something like F3 followed by G4. I might still play G3. Though rook to G8 followed by queen to H3 seems pretty logical. But we'll see. Rook A to D1. I like that. Though his bishop does have that pawn covered for now. Though fianchetto looks reasonable. Interesting. Queenside castle. So now we do rook F to D1. I mean, B4. That would be wonderful. I mean, it's pretty much pushed the queenside pieces. He castled queenside. Let's crush it. It's the weaker of the two castling defenses. Though he has compensated for that by playing A6. As, of course, A7 is often exploited, because the king doesn't end up there after the castle. As on the kingside castle, the king defends the 3 pawns ahead of it after the castle, and there are no more pawns, such as a 4th pawn on the edge of the board, as in the queenside castle. Now that does prevent my play of B4. However, I think that will be sufficient. I think my rooks here are going to be pretty powerful as long as I stay away from C1, which his bishop at H6 has targeted. Everything should be fine. Of course, D2 is also out of bounds, if you will. So my rooks are kind of locked in a good position, thankfully. He has no knight for any potential fork, such as knight to C3. I hope we play till 10:22. Alright, that's 22:22. Sorry. Interesting. I'm gonna pay no heed. I mean, knight to g3 after the pawn exchange. It should be sufficient. And there it is. Now, of course, he can stack up his rooks, but I can't, unfortunately, bring a rook to g1 because of his bishop at e3. So bishop at e3 becomes some sort of a target. Something simple as rook to b3 might be sufficient. I could even bring the queen upon it. However, whenever you bring the queen into a fight, there's always the risk of her getting attacked. There we go. That's a nice move because it actually pins the knight at g3. I love my rook at d1 because it's on the same file as black's queen, which makes that pawn in front of it at d6 weak. Advances of the pawn exchanges that may potentially open up the d file are will put black's queen at high risk. So moving that rook isn't my favorite idea, but rook to g1 I feel is the best move for now. I can also bring my other rook at b1 to d1 on my next move if I want, though that would leave the pawn at b4 hanging, so maybe playing queen to b3 before that might be a better idea. One good thing about that is it also covers the e3 square where black's bishop could come to threaten an attack on my rook at g1. So a repositioning of the queen on my next move might be a good idea. Now, of course, conflict at the g3 square where my knight sits is a possibility. But as if it stands right now, I'm ahead. However, my king is involved, which means my king would end up at g3 at the end of any exchange in this melee. See, okay, he's planning to file up his rooks now. Sort of obliged to do that. If he plays rook d to g8, I'm going to have to play rook b to g2. It's just going to have to happen. Unfortunately, his queen can also take my pawn at h4. No, it can't. Excuse me. It can't. Oh, see, now there's that move where my queen at b3 would be able to have defended against. That's okay, because as long as his bishop's not at f4. So what I want to do here is play this first. In case he does reposition the bishop, I can play my rook to g1. The rook at b1. b1 with the force. Now, of course, if you were to play c takes b, not a big issue. I'd probably just simply play queen to b3. But he has an opportunity to gain a free pawn for the most part. I mean, I could capture back with the rook, but I probably wouldn't want to, because then it runs the risk of losing my knight at g3. Look at that 15-15 classic rated. We got a little turtle for an icon. I wouldn't say I'm slow as a turtle. Alright, see, so now it is necessary to play that. So he's looking to capture my pawn at h4. Now he could play queen to e6 check. He could also... No, he couldn't do that. It's pretty cramped there. My king's bold, but I feel safe. Alright, so he does give the check. So now I'll fall back. I am not all that disappointed in getting a draw out of this game, but I'm a fighter. But this position, unless he gives me the ability to make some sort of attacks on his queen side, isn't going to really help me in any way. The king side is very much locked down. Look at those rooks on the G file. I mean, everything but my queen. Alright, see now. Alright, simple enough. Just threaten it. I'll play threefold repetition in this one, just because I want to get on to another game, and I think my opponent's no dummy. So, we'll see. Interestingly enough, some players are just so new to the website or the mobile app. I'm not sure what the case is here. I do know on timeforchess.com, after threefold repetition has occurred, any player on either side, black or white, can claim a draw on their turn. Some players don't realize that it doesn't automatically happen like it does on chess.com, which is debatable as to whether or not that's a good thing, because I've used this as a strategy to make my opponent lose, because they go beyond it and they're like, why did it happen? So they make a different move and then they just blew it. Alright, I would love to play knight to f5 because it would fork his queen and his rook. However, it opens up the G file, and two rooks against my one would not do so well. He also brought a defense on his bishop at e3. So I think rook to e2 would allow me to play that fork on the next move. Oh, I take that back. I could have done it, but it would have involved my queen. Alright, he's moved the queen and has put the pin back on. That's actually rather unfortunate, because I can't get my rook to g1 now. And he's brought an attack on h4 again. And if I go through an exchange, he could end up with his queen at g3 and checkmate. Did not play this one too well. I lose a knight. Do I lose the game? I think he was trying to be creative. Um, I don't think it worked. He Yeah, see, he won the night. Um, but I'll take this challenge. But if he's smart, he captures. C takes B. I don't think I can square that pawn. And I certainly can't stop the one on the H file. Let's see what he does. It's been a good game. I'll have to look it over to see where I had an inaccuracy or two. I can't stop it. Did you see I could not step within the square on my next move? The square, of course, would have been from b4 down to e1. So I'm going to run out to this pawn, let him promote, and my next few moves are going to lock up my pawn so I can try to play for a stalemate. Alright, now I'm going to play for a stalemate. One way to get into a stalemate is to get very close to your opponent's pieces if they try to play an opposition mode method, which is what you should do if you're trying to get into a mating I just blanked on the term, scheme, if you will, a mating scheme. See, now getting close is dangerous, but sometimes you can't directly attack, so you have to play more an opposition method, limiting my squares. And if you limit my squares too much, to the point where I can't move legally on my next turn, but you don't have me in check, it's called a stalemate. Also, just running away, being a pain, I know, but the clock might win. For me, he might run out of time. These are pressures in these game situations, and you see them in tournament situations, and there is a sort of chess etiquette, but I'm a never say die. When it comes to chess, I don't offer or accept draws often. I almost never resign. My f3 pawn is still free. Look, a stalemate. So, let's see what the position looked like. See, he was trying to play an opposition move. He was hoping to play queen to d2 on his next move. But my king can't move here legally, and he does not have me in check. So it's a stalemate. I'm sure this is burning this guy up. I hope not. It used to burn me up, but it happens. And it's one reason why you should play on even though you've lost the game. Because you might not lose the game. You might get a draw. Let's try another one and see if I can get a proper win. 1510, my favorite time setting. But people don't often accept it on lichess.org. So we'll give it a few minutes perhaps. Well, that's quite long. Maybe as long as I am winded, and then we'll see. Not 12,000 players. 4,000 are in play. Oh, we got one. Pancake Matt. Matt likes pancakes. Okay, excellent. I couldn't resist. He's just ignoring me. Wait, no. Excuse me. Pancake Matt. I love it. Good show. Good show. So, if you see, I'm playing elements of Sicilian defense, even though it's not like in order, but it's all book responses to positions, and you can play it like that. Um, you know, out of sequence, but you end up with the same sort of transposed position. Um, I don't know. It's pretty basic. Yeah, oblige me to castle, which is fine. I'll play bishop to b7 next, most likely. Rook to e8. Pushing the pawn. I mean, attack the knight, why not? Now I hold a solid center, unopposed by white's pawns. Bringing a rook on is bold. It's a good idea, but that's a 5-point material piece as opposed to the knights and bishops, which are 3 points of material value. It does, however, pin my pawn against my queen. Let's just push the pawn. Not the best idea because it could end up isolated. As it stands, the E-D file pair is strong. But I'm going to take a risk on this pawn. Take a chance. I'm giving into the same open center that white already has. It seemed to have worked. Oh, I was hoping to play on that one. Alright. It's not boasting or bragging. It's a good game. I have posted losses. Anyway, let's get to chess.com because they actually have 1510 as a preset. Let's see. So there's a good chance I'll get an opponent quite quickly. I'm going to play the English opening. Now, it can be thought of as a reverse Sicilian. Actions on the D file. That's interesting. It's a atypical move. I try an atypical response. The idea here is these pawns, they're still in effect, but these pawns, they're pawns in the most strongest sense of the term here. They're just going to simply be sacrificed on both sides, and white will have a slight tempo advantage. Bishop to g2 first. Fianchettoed bishop controls the diagonal, just as rooks can control files and ranks. See, now I could just play a3. But I like that better. Wow, we are the same rating. Now d takes c, I would play knight takes e4. Just like that. Simply now the d file is open for my queen to defend my knight at d4 against black's queen. And of course e3 on the next move. Actually, here I'm going to go to fianchetto my bishop. He may castle. Okay, that's fine. He castles. I'm going to castle slightly late, but I'm ahead on development. So it's okay. The only problem with 1510 is people take a while. I have a player in my club, he takes quite some time. So this may not be someone on a chess engine, but the thing is at the speed it may be. But I don't care. That's the thing you take, the risk, if you will, with online chess, especially in correspondence chess. He moved, I wasn't paying attention. It's risky, but I'm confident. Wow, this guy's taking a while. Sorry. So I guess, plans. Knight takes bishop at f5. Does open up the d file for black's queen to take mine. Could thin it out a bit and get my rooks a little more activated. I would like a rook on the d file. Rook on the e file would probably be helpful because then I could push my pawn to e4 with confidence. I can do it right now because of my bishop at a8, but that may not always be there, especially on the next move. If black decides to take that bishop with his queen, but it looks like he might auto-resign in 170 seconds. Sorry, guys. I hope it doesn't come to this. Sometimes you run into this on chess.com. Your opponent simply abandons the game. Is it rude? Yes. Is it illegal? No. Is it allowed? Tolerated? It's tolerated. Is it frowned upon? Most definitely. You can actually get penalties through the website because of doing it. Not able to join games or whatever for hours, maybe days. Yes, it happened to me once. Probably shortly after they implemented it. Just a bad string of games, and I was in a bad mood. But it's pretty much letting the game run out on time without making any moves, making your opponent have to wait for the victory that they should get if you were to just simply resign. Now, if you're actively moving, they don't care, but if it's you let it just sit there, and I guess somehow they can determine if that's the case or not. Now, a couple times, it happened to me by accident because I lost my connection to the internet. But there were a couple times where I was just like, I'm gonna let it run. Yeah, you got a bad day, whatever. But yeah, it looks like he's letting this one run out. We might see a little message from the server saying what happened to this opponent. They'll say they were warned, I believe, or something to that nature. Now, sometimes they'll jump back in like the last 45 seconds and make their move, and then the clock goes back to normal. And maybe I've set my phone aside and started watching TV because I knew this was going to be a timeout, and all of a sudden he moves, and I don't notice, and I lose on time. But that's not going to happen in this case. And again, maybe he lost his connection to the internet or something like that. Anyway, after this, I'm going to go, guys, and I'll see you probably tomorrow. I'm actually going to be working. I know it's a Saturday, but I'll probably make a post before and after work, maybe once during. Take care.